Yeah, I don't know. This is going to be largely unscripted, I think.
Don't like the sound of that immediately. So my notes are written in the order I thought of them, which was kind of some overall thoughts and then the fights. Are we best off just kind of going through the fights and then wrapping up? Do we want to start with a conclusion?
You can lead. I'll let you take the lead on this.
No, that's not what I want.
Well,
I want a firm agreement, ideally shaken on and signed.
I have given this episode very little thought. It was going to be, for me, anything I say is very much off the top of my head. There's no planned statements from me.
So I think we should start off at least acknowledging the fact the robot was shit. And go from there.
Yeah, okay.
We will acknowledge the fact we also had a good time, but everyone needs to know the robot was shit. And we can end on the things we believe are wrong. Sound good?
Yep.
Excellent. I've led, now you get to follow.
Well, I don't know whether to just use that as the beginning of the podcast now. That's the thing.
I mean, I was going to go on a tangent quickly just for our conversational benefit.
Okay.
Which is that I am thinking of going to the next Antweight event. It's in Milton Keynes. I believe I can get there very cheaply. I have the guts of an Antweight currently hanging out of a hastily constructed shell from Euros.
Sounds like you need to make an Antweight.
I think I do, yeah. I've been looking at wheels.
The bane of every single one of our robots.
The one thing that I think has held me back. So think of Reginald from Euros. The limiting factor was the size of the wheels. So just buy bigger wheels, Ryan. That's all you got to do. And then all designs become easy.
So you're looking at bigger wheels, are you?
Slightly bigger wheels. Bigger wheels would be good so that I could do the foam board robot more easily. That'd be like the main benefit of the bigger wheels. But if I go for normal materials, I might as well stick with the smaller ones. But I only have one of those now anyway because the other one broke. So... Decisions. I'm also in two minds. Whether I go for another front hinge and do it better, or if I try and make a thwackbot work in the cube.
I think the thwackbot in a cube is harder.
Yep.
Which is not to say you shouldn't do it, but I think it's harder. I also think that I really liked your front hinge. I genuinely thought that was a really great robot.
I think it would be quite easy to do within the cube, because that one was just outside of it, but that was because the material was so thick.
Yeah.
I think a good front hinge is quite doable.
I think you could absolutely do that, and the way that you got the mechanism working and stuff, I think is great. It's like very simple and elegant. I think you could absolutely build that out of plastic, no problem.
I think it would be harder to do that out of not foam board, because with the foam board one, everything was hot glued together, like everything. And I feel like if you're using proper materials, you probably need proper fastening.
Yeah, I really want to get some of those. You know those nut strip things.
Yes, the Bristol Bot Builders site sells them.
Yeah, I've been eyeing them up for a little while, sort of feeling like they might be quite useful. For
beetle purposes, yes. For an ant, I think they're just a kind of volume sink.
Well, I don't know. I think they'd be useful, even the ant weights, because like we've done pretty hacky things to get stuff joined at right angles in split decision.
There are no right angles in split decision. Don't lie.
Sorry, we've done pretty hacky things to get joined things at approximately right angles.
I still love what we did with split decision. The whole thermoplastic, moulded and shaped thing was brilliant.
Yeah, I regret nothing about it.
And that robot has served us damn well ever since.
It gets a laugh every time we use it.
That's over 1.5 years old now, isn't it?
Yeah. and we've not serviced it once.
We reattached the motor that fell out at RoboNerd.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, sorry. We've repaired
And we changed the weapon as well.
Oh yeah, that is true. We went from a ridiculous scalpel to a ridiculous miniature version of our axe.
And then it finally hit its final form at the weekend.
Oh my goodness me, that was
So good.
That was brilliant.
So good. And that is why the cube is bad. You could not do that within the cube.
No,
The cube is ruining ant weights.
it's ruining the sport. No, killing the sport.
You killed the joke. Well done.
I think that's the second time I've tried to make that joke, and the second time I've got it wrong in probably the same way.
That sounds very plausible. But yeah, I need to do an order of servos, something I want to do at work anyway, so might as well get a few bits in and play about with them.
Yeah.
Because this hasn't been a hilariously expensive month. But generally, I feel like I've had this Nano 2 sitting around for a good 3 years now, probably. So would it be that long?
Maybe not quite that long.
A couple of years.
Yeah.
I think I had that thing before we made Split Decision, put it that way. Because we both had one intending to build, never did. Then we used yours in Split Decision,
Yep.
and mine just kept hanging around. So it's a good 2 years or more.
Yeah.
And I feel like I might as well get it broken.
It needs a home, man. Like, it needs to be used.
It's just sad to have that sitting around doing nothing. And if I can cheaply and easily get to an event and get someone to break it for me, why not?
Yeah, do it.
You are, by the way, I'm saying this like it's just me thing. You are very welcome to come along if you want, but I recognise you're probably busy and it's quite a long way.
When is it?
15th of March, I think.
Oh, there is a... As soon as you said March, it's like, yeah, I'm probably busy. Yeah, I'm not around. My calendar in March is terrifying. I don't like looking at it. My heart rate goes up every time I see that month.
In a way, I'm almost happier doing it by myself, if that makes sense. Just because otherwise, I will rely on you to fix my crap. And having to do it by myself, I think, will be a good thing.
Yeah, well, I don't know. One of these days, I think I should build a robot on my own as well, but...
Yeah, but then it will be good, and we can't have that.
I don't know about that. It'd be different, I think.
If you did a solo build, would it be serious or would it be silly?
It would be a crusher, is what it would be.
It would be a grabber, very nice.
No, I would honestly, I would go hell for leather, try and make a crusher. I'd do everything I could to try and do it. That, or the other one I've thought about that would be quite funny to do is like a 4-bar punch bot thing. I don't know whether you want to qualify those as serious or silly, but those are the two ideas that really appeal to me as things I could do on my own.
I'd forgotten about the punch bot thing. I feel like they're both ideas where they could be serious or silly depending on how you approach competing with them. If your aim is to go out and in one fight show that your weapon works, and you're not really worried about win or lose, I think you can allow it to fall on the silly side. Whereas if you're building those things because you think they are effective and you think that you will win with them, and that's what you want to do, they're serious. And I also think you can be both.
Yeah, like I wouldn't want to build a robot that's boring still. I do, really enjoy building entertaining robots, and which is why I think I'd rather do slightly less used weapon ideas. Just to see how hard it would be. I think the crusher would obviously be much harder to do, especially the kind of crusher that I want to build would be, I mean, let's face it, impossible. Like, I don't think I could actually do it, but I would like to really try and do it.
Are you thinking the kind of lead screw approach?
Yeah, that's the sort of best approach I've sort of seen. I think is the most manageable. I wonder if that on some kind of like high voltage brushless maybe, but...
See, I wonder if there's a way to do a decent crusher on what is essentially a winch.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, I think you could build something that can crush in this weight. I just think the weapon would have to move so damn slowly to do it that it wouldn't work. It's really that balance between speed and power that you need to get right. And I've had a few sort of beginnings of tendrils of ideas for how to for things to do about that. Like wondering if you had like faster, less powerful things that acted just as a grabber to hold it while the slower arm came down and did the damage and stuff like that. But
are you thinking beetle or ant here?
Beetle.
Good, because at that point I think it becomes more viable.
Yeah, I don't think you could build. I don't think you could build an ant weight crusher that could actually crush anything. That's not. I'm not going to say never. I'm not experienced enough to say definitively what is not possible. But I think that the smaller you go, the harder it is to do.
I'm sure it can be done, but done by you is always the question, isn't it? Royal you, not specific you.
Well, I think specific me in this case, the answer is definitely no.
You're part of the royal you.
But yeah, I'd love to try and build a beetle weight crusher.
And I would love to see you do it. It'd be nice to get to a point where we've both got our own beetles that could potentially come up against each other in a competition.
That would be interesting.
I don't know what that situation would bring out in both of us. It's like, for me, I'm not competitive in that losing will not affect my enjoyment of competing. That doesn't mean I don't want to win. It definitely doesn't mean I wouldn't want to win against you.
I think if it was us fighting, I think it would change the dynamic for both of us. I would try a lot harder to win if I were fighting you, I think. It also, I think, depends on how much we'd helped each other out on the builds and stuff. Like, if we'd put a lot of work into each other's robots, I think it would be much harder to do significant damage to them.
Oh, no. I think the exact opposite. We always want to see our own robots get broken. So I think that would just be even greater if we'd help build the other person's.
The thing is, there's a distinction between wanting my own or our own robots to get broken and wanting to be the person responsible for it. I wouldn't just throw the robot off the top of a roof, for example, like, just to see it get damaged. Like, I would, it needs to be in a fight, obviously. And then, like, I don't know. I'm not sure I'd want to be responsible for wrecking a robot that I'd put any significant amount of work into. But then who knows? Who knows what it would be like on the day.
But you'd be happy wrecking one that you didn't put work into.
Well, yeah, because there's none of my time in it, I'm not watching my time and money get wrecked. I'm watching someone else's time and money get wrecked.
You see, I think you should be more willing to break the thing that you made than break the thing the other person made, even though we all know we're there for exactly the same reason.
No. I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe in an ideal world that should be the way, but if I'm being honest with myself, I don't think that's how I'd feel.
I think for me, the biggest factor if we were fighting would be if I felt your robot was better and more entertaining than mine, at which point I would want it to win just for the good of the tournament and for my own enjoyment of watching it.
No, but think of the upset.
Well, we'll get to that. my complex feelings about upsets. It means I'm going to get to mention the Dwayne Nibley fight again, so it's all good.
Oh, dearie me.
Shall we talk Beatles?
Suppose so.
Do we have to talk Beatles?
Look, we've just done our third tournament, and I think it's the right and honourable thing to do to talk about it.
That means that if you were on the Discord, you'd be eligible for a Roboteer status now, I believe. 3 major tournaments.
I mean, you're eligible for it as well.
Excuse me, I'm a content creator, not a Roboteer.
Am I not a content creator? I feel like I am, aren't
I don't think you've ever outed yourself on Discord.
I think Gareth has marked me in some way.
That's why he was running around the pits of the branding iron. Okay. I don't know what I'd rather be.
I don't know. I find content creator weird.
But you're creating content right now.
That's just a horrible. That's such a horrible kind of corporate term.
What colour do you prefer, orange or red?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like my name is Red on Discord.
Oh, okay. You're already a content creator.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm pretty sure that I'd be marked in some way.
Let's face it. If one of us is going to be labelled content creator and one Roboteer, it should probably be me as content creator and you as Roboteer.
Why is that?
Because you do most of the work building. Although, to be fair, you do most of the work content creating as well.
Yeah, I should be both and you should be nothing.
I'll speak to Gareth and get him to arrange that for us.
But a mere peasant beneath my feet, that's not how I feel. I feel like you contribute far more to both the podcast and the robot than you give yourself credit for.
I contribute the planning, which is why I feel the need to mention today 4 pages.
Yeah. You'll observe my complete lack of planning.
I literally do infinitely more planning than you.
Pretty much. I maintain that the podcast and our robots would not exist without you. So there you go.
In a causal sense, that's very obviously true. Unless you genuinely believe there is someone else in the world that you would have started this exact podcast with and made the exact same episodes with.
I'm not sure I know anyone else who would have made, 70 podcast episodes about combat robotics at this point.
Do you genuinely know anyone else that you would have made one with?
I've got one mate who also likes this enough that he might have done a podcast, but I'm also not sure if he's into podcasts enough to have done it. So I genuinely don't know. I think that you are that in the Venn diagram of things. You are in the cross section.
I'm now imagining a version of Spinnerproof where you're the knowledgeable, super keen one.
that would be a very different show.
Very different. Unfortunately, I think we're dodging the issue here, aren't we?
We should talk about not Yui or Fuey, however you want to call it. What is it called? What was the tournament called?
So it was never called Yui.
I know, but like, what was it?
It was always Bristol Bot Builders Bot Brawl, something like that thing, 2020.
Okay.
Except on the competitors' pogs, where they had put Yui, which was a move that panned out super well.
Did we get one of those? Have I lost it?
We did, and I'm assuming you swept it up when you were tidying. Have I assumed wrong?
I can have a look for it right now, or I can have a look for it after the show.
I think after the show, probably another day would make most sense. Because you don't want to be up all night.
Actually, I think I know where it is. It's if it's anywhere, it's probably in, my big thing of drawers. It's probably in one of those drawers.
I was assuming the flat thing with 2 layers.
No.
This is becoming very self-serving. Let's move on.
All of our podcasts are self-serving.
And yet this feels like it's crossing a line of, let's talk about how Sam organises his bits.
Damn it. Title within 20 minutes.
I think that there are far more honest titles available for this. About how Kylo Ren is a complete disappointment to everyone.
Oh, dearie me.
It's weird because this is both the best and worst outing we've ever had competitively.
Yeah.
A really good day. Absolutely a really good day. Despite all the problems we had, got to see some incredible fights. Probably the best end to a fight I've ever seen in particular. And hang around with loads of people who are great. So in that respect, all brilliant. The robot itself, just get it out of my sight.
Yeah, Kylo's a massive disappointment to both of us. But yeah, I will echo Ryan's sentiment. I worry that sometimes it doesn't look like it, but I did really enjoy that day. It's very tiring for me, but it's so much fun as well. It's really, really lovely seeing everyone, and really great fun watching the fights and working on the robot. And yeah, I feel like I had another point, but I don't know what it is.
Did you just start a list that sounded like it had more things in it than it actually did?
I feel like I should do a final thing now, just to complete the list. People are really nice to us, which I really appreciate. People have been very supportive of Kylo, even though it's a disappointment. People encouraging us in the fights and stuff. So thank you.
And we also got a huge amount of support trying to work out what the problem was, both at the event and afterwards, which we're incredibly grateful for.
Yeah.
So, I suggested a way of doing this, and now I'm not sure it's right. Do we want to talk through the issues first? I feel like we need to talk through the issues first.
Let's talk about Kylo. Because Kylo was designed Kylo's an experimental robot for us. We tried a lot of new stuff in it.
New to us stuff, not new to robot combat at all.
Yeah.
About the complete opposite of that.
This is our second Beetleweight. We are not revolutionising anything here, but we're trying things that we've not tried before. And we're still early in our roboteering careers. Yeah, so we wanted to do 4-wheel drive with 4 motors. We didn't do that in Hello There, and we tried a way of doing that here. We also wanted to try and use steel just to see what that would be like to work with, and what the cost of that would be.
And how effective it would be as well.
And so we did that, and that was interesting as well. And the other thing is that this is built to be more maintainable than Hello There. We wanted to build a robot that we could actually work on and in some ways adapt at the events. So I think those are the 3 main things. It was experimental. Well, I say experimental. It was a new approach to drive. new materials, and a better way of assembling the robot.
And for what it's worth, before I get into the flood of negativity, for the most part, I would say the experimental bits were a success. The wedge took hits way better than I ever expected. And the overall build style and the layout was so much more maintainable. Like, orders of magnitude easier to maintain.
Yeah, if we had to do that kind of electronics rework in Hello There, we just wouldn't have been able to do it, I don't think. Well, maybe we would have. It would have been such a pain in the ass to do that. That's the thing. Like, things are possible in Hello There, but it's just so hard to get to anything to do it. Whereas it's much easier in this. Like, we had problems where the gearboxes fell off the motors, or started to come loose at least. And getting a motor out and then actually sort of reattaching the gearbox is doable in about half an hour in Kylo, which is possibly still too long. But like,
it's not in half an hour. We did like 3 of them in 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. Maybe my estimates of time are rubbish, but yeah, like it's a thing that's plausible to do between fights, and we did it. Whereas to do the same thing in Hello There would have, I don't know how long it would have taken. I don't want to think about what it would take to do that.
And what's also really important is that, as far as I can tell, with one exception, every panel can be removed independently of the rest of the robot. Whereas there are some things you would have to do with Hello There where you'd have to basically crack the robot open like an egg and have it sat on the desk in about 3 pieces to get to something. Which meant that I certainly was always wary of doing any preventative maintenance for fear of how long it would take to get it from that state back into something enterable. Whereas with Kylo, you might have a side and the top off, but you knew that would be a 3 or 4 minute job to get back together, and there wasn't that much that could go wrong in the process. If you've got Hello There in 2 pieces, it's so easy to put pressure on the wrong part and completely tear 3 screws out. It's fine when it's all together, it's really sturdy when it's all together, but as soon as it's taken apart at all, the whole thing is very difficult to work with. You have to sort of wrap it up in cotton wool in ways that you shouldn't have to wrap up a combat robot.
Yeah, so I think in terms of sort of having a more maintainable robot, this is a roaring success. And I think I have a few ideas for how to improve it even more in the next robot. But like we've proven to ourselves that we can build a robot that can be serviced in a useful way. And I'm really pleased with that. I'm really pleased with that aspect of this robot.
And then in testing, the 4-wheel drive was beautiful. If we didn't have the wedge on.
Yeah, that wedge. I wanted to mention about the steel, actually. The steel was more effective in combat than I thought it would be, and also much easier to work with than I thought it would be. I was expecting it to be a nightmare, but the jigsaw that I have is fine with it, and then even drilling holes with a crummy Argos hand drill thing is fine.
It was easier to countersink than HDPE.
Sorry?
It was easier to countersink than HDPE is, which is ridiculous.
It's possibly a function of my rubbish countersink bit, but yeah.
For clarity, I suppose, just in case people are actually listening to this trying to get ideas on build materials and things, the wedge was 2mm mild steel. The idea of using that came from watching how well Claws 2 stands up to big hits.
Yeah, I wonder if we could have got away with a thinner steel as well.
Maybe. I don't know. We'd have to experiment with that again.
I'm not sure we will, but yeah. It was interesting working with it. It's really interesting to see how differently it behaves compared to HDPE and spinners. Like, I think we'd sort of knew already that HDPE obviously gives spinners of all varieties a really easy way to bite the robot and send us flying. But the difference that makes is huge. Like, we didn't get thrown around nearly as much with Kylo as we do with Hello There. And even when we were sort of like, there's so many marks on the front of this wedge from drums just kind of grinding against the steel, or even like horizontals and stuff. Just they can't get a bite into it, really. I'm sure some can, but for the most part, they just kind of glance off and make a lot of noise.
And that's the thing I really liked about having that steel front end. It makes prolonged head-to-head sort of shoving matches with spinners possible, which, if we had an overhead weapon on this, would be immensely valuable.
Yeah, and if we had drive power worth a damn, it would be immensely valuable as well.
Yeah, and contact with the robot at all times.
Yeah.
But yeah, in those respects, a lot of stuff that we have learned from this that is useful and positive. There's a lot of stuff we've learned for other reasons as well, or are still trying to learn because we still don't really know what was wrong. But I think it's important that we do look at those positive bits as well.
Yeah. So what I found really interesting with Kylo is obviously like we can sort of learn a lot from the things that have gone well, but we can also learn a lot from the things that haven't gone so well and the failures of it. And especially that in contrast with Hello There. And the overriding thing that's gone wrong here is the electronics that we had serious issues with all day. It never worked in the arena the way it was meant to. We had no drive power for most of our fights, or for most of our time in the arena. Like, the drive was genuinely just completely unpowered. We had nothing, and even when we did have drive, it was not the power that we wanted. I think the weight distribution of the robot meant that we weren't putting all the power from the 4 motors down onto the ground very well. But yeah, like I said, even when the motors were spinning, so when the motors were spinning, we weren't getting all the power out of them. But a lot of the time, the robot just had nothing. It was as if the transmitter was off, and it was immensely frustrating.
I mean, meaning to ask, did you feel the robot was generally sluggish in the arena? Because looking back at fights, there are moments where we really get going, and others where we seem to just be crawling, but I don't know if that's just you being cautious.
I would say that we had full control and full power maybe at most 1% of the time. Like, genuinely, like, it was never right in the arena, basically. Like, I'd like get half a second maybe of it working, and then it would cut out and coast, which sort of looks like Sam's just driving a bit conservatively, but it's like, no, this is just coasting towards a spinner, and there's nothing I can do to change anything about it for the next 5 seconds. It's just going that way. And so that was frustrating, and that was the electronics issue. But even, like I said, even when the electronics weren't being dumb and annoying, because of the weight distribution, it was really hard to control. And even testing it in my kitchen where I don't have the electronics issues, it's hard to drive accurately. It's hard to drive it in a straight line. It's hard to drive and turn when you want and stuff. Like, I had a really hard time. I think in our first fight, I couldn't hit the pit. I was trying at the end to try and get to the pit, and you could see me drive towards it and then suddenly veer off to the right. And that wasn't me doing that. The robot just veered off to the right.
When I drove, it was veering off to the left.
Yeah, well, it's just unpredictable and chaotic, which is not what you want in a 4-wheel drive wedge.
Although it is really living up to its name in that respect.
Yeah.
It's just not the chaos we wanted.
Temperamental teenage robot.
For me, one of the big takeaways from this whole experience is just how differently our first experience of competing could have gone. Imagine if this was our first robot and how we'd feel. I mean, we don't feel good, but at least we know that in Hello There we built something that worked exactly as intended. So in a sense, we know it's not just us. We are now on a sort of 50-50 on the knife edge. Let's see how the next one goes, but that's better than having a sort of 0 out of 1 for robots that actually went and worked. And again, let's not forget, somehow we won 2 fights with this thing.
Oh, this is something that's a bit of a thing for me. Like, we technically won 2 fights, but like, I wouldn't say we won anything.
No, me either.
And I know that like people are going to hit like I said that on the day, and people are like, no, you won, and I really appreciate you sort of saying that and encouraging us in that way. But like, what I want from a robot that we've built that we haven't had yet is a definitive win, like an actual knockout that isn't as a result of the other robot losing. Because the 2 wins we got were basically the other robots that we were fighting losing. And yeah, that counts as a win. And yeah, that means that we got further through the tournament than we do normally. But it's not what I'd like. And so I would call them technical wins. I'm glad that we got them. I'm glad that we got to go as far through the tournament as we did. But yeah, it was not the kind of wins that we wanted.
Yeah, I'm completely with you on the wins. I think the really rough thing about the day in my mind is that I feel like we kind of lost out on the opportunity to have a triumphant first win in our roboteering careers. It's like you only get to win for the first time once, and our first win was not a win, basically. We didn't do anything to win that fight. It's not a fight that I can look back on fondly and go, yeah, we did it. And that's no one's fault. That's not... Well, I'm going to say it's not our fault. I think that's fair to say. We did not design and build a robot with the intention of it having problems. And it's not the opponent's fault either. It's just a slightly crappy thing that's happened.
Yeah. That was the Bourbon fight, wasn't it?
Yes. I think we should quickly run through the fights, or else we're going to end up talking in vague terms about loads of things that we could just talk about in proper detail.
I don't know why you're being vague. Our first win was against Bourbon, and we won because Bourbon got stuck, which is rubbish. I also want to say, I tried so hard. I was determined to get Bourbon out of that, and it doesn't look like it in the video because our robot is not doing what I want it to do. So Bourbon got stuck, and I spent a few seconds just like engaging the drill just for a laugh. And then I thought, oh no, they're stuck. I want to keep this fight going. I want to get them out again. But the Kylo just doesn't do what I want, and I couldn't get enough momentum to push him out. And I think given how hard it was to get Bourbon unstuck at the end, I'm not sure we could have done anyway. But I don't know. I tried. I really wanted Bourbon to get free. I really wanted to be thrown around more by Bourbon. I think that's a really unfortunate loss there.
Understanding, as I do, the issues the robot was having, I do find it faintly funny to watch that fight back, knowing that you're trying to go towards him, and every time you do, the robot does something that makes you actively get further away.
Oh, it's infuriating. I couldn't get round to the side. I wanted to sort of like get round to the side and then push from the side, but I think at some point I ended up pushing him from the back, which just makes him more stuck. It makes me look like some kind of vindictive asshole. And that's not what I was trying to do.
Like the one time you get a good run up and contact is from directly behind.
It's so frustrating. It's honestly maddening. And so in that fight, I don't know that you can see me in the video that Joe posted. I am literally in that corner. I am 30 centimeters away from the robots, and I still can't control it. It's not as if the transmitter's the transmitter clearly isn't getting through. There's something about that going on. But I couldn't be any closer to the robot without being in the arena, and I'm still having these drive issues. It's maddening.
Just because my mind is a disordered place, I really want to go through the fights now, just to get that done.
Fine. Go.
If you think that's a terrible idea, then please tell me.
No, if you want to do it, you can do it. Like I said, you can lead this episode. You're getting in your own head about thinking you want to go through the fights as one thing, and then you talk vaguely about them for a while, and then you get more in your own head about it.
It's a vicious circle, and one that we must break out of.
Go on, talk about the fights. That was the Bourbon one.
Talking of vicious circles... Hang on, my headphones are being silly. Speak for me.
Sorry?
Speak, boy, speak.
I'm speaking, boy!
Thank you. So my headphones must have been slightly falling out.
Not good.
So, talking of vicious circles, our first fight was bat bottom wedging and let the good times roll.
Indeed.
2 vicious circles, really, and a wedge. Although, for me, the most memorable part of this fight is the fact that for about half an hour before it, I thought we were fighting a different robot.
You muppet. I had a very confusing conversation with Mark before that half fight. It's like, are we fighting you? And I'm like, what are you on about? We're not fighting you. It was very confusing.
I'd told him that as well. He hadn't even checked.
Yeah.
So I'm now worried that they were preparing for the wrong fight for 20 minutes. So, sorry guys, if that was the case. Turns out I thought there were only 2 clusters in the competition when there were 3. Because I'm a clever man with his finger on the pulse of the UK Beetleweight scene.
I mean, you're more on the pulse than I am.
It's not hard though, is it?
It's not the point.
So we were fighting bat bottom wedging, really neat little cluster comprised of a vert and a very, very, very low profile wedge.
God, that thing is... That is a wedge, my friend. That is amazing.
It's like true doorstop proportions.
Yeah.
And it was very, very effective against us.
Yeah, as much to do with an excellent design on their behalf and a rubbish design on ours, I think.
And then, I'll be honest, I was a little bit annoyed about fighting Let the Good Times Roll. Because A, I really didn't want a vert first fight. I fully believed that any vert was just going to rip our wedge off. But I also was annoyed because it was a rematch and therefore less good data. As it is, I'd spoken to Milo a couple of times in the run-up to the competition. If we could, we were going to whiteboard anyway. So it was good to come up in the competition, really. But that thing is scary. Yeah. Very, very scary.
This was prime Let the Good Times Roll, so it was good to fight them.
So in this case, it was the opposite of prime.
This particular fight was not prime Let the Good Times Roll, but moving forwards, it was prime.
When you think of the problems we had and how annoying they are, Their problem in this fight must have been infinitely more annoying for them.
Yeah, because there was, what was it? The battery charger was broken, and it was reporting that the battery was charged when it wasn't.
Which is just so insanely out of your control.
Yeah, that's not a failure mode I'd have predicted.
And it meant that they went in, they got through tech check fine with the spin-up test because there was enough juice in the battery for that. By the time they got to the arena, basically nothing there. Which is so sucky for them. Also sucky for us because I think we'd only really planned for Let the Good Times Roll. In our thinking about the fight, we completely ignored the cluster. And therefore had no idea what to do against it, even if we could have if the robot was working.
Oh dear. This was such a disappointing first fight. So we put the robot in, and the second I tried to drive it somewhere, it was like, we've got problems. Like, we passed tech check just fine, including a weapons demonstration. Absolutely fine, no problems.
That was outside of the arena, wasn't it?
Outside of the arena. Put it in the arena, and it was immediately like, we got problems here. Just instant. I couldn't drive it properly. And Tim asked, is your weapon active? And I tried to fire the weapon to demonstrate that it was active. And it didn't go. And I was like, yes, it is active. And didn't say that it wasn't working at that point. Tim didn't need to know that I tried to drive it. I think it kind of twitched a little bit at that point. But yes, it was technically active. Or meant
so what
to
you're
be.
saying is it's Tim's fault.
Clearly Tim's fault, yeah. I mean, he's got it out for us. He gives us evils every time he sees us. But yeah, so it went in and then never worked. The hot, like, immediately had problems and lost drive. And you could see every time that little wedge got under us, even a little bit, we were screwed. We couldn't get off. We're too heavy for the wedge to drive out from under us. And we had no drive in the rear wheels. So as soon as our front wheels were lifted off, that was it. We were stuck there together. So that was like on top of all the electrical issues that we were having just from interference and stuff like that, I think. We had no drive to the rear wheels and no weapon. And the reason for that is that our crank, I guess, on the weapon, the thing that drives the drill in and out, ate a wire and then ate most of our electronics and pulled things out of the receiver and yeah, just sort of did a number on the internals of the robot, which was, I don't know when that happened, but it happened.
It must have happened pre-fight when you tried to show off the weapon.
It must have done, yeah.
So it's worth saying that the issues with signal, drive, whatever, were there beforehand as well. This was on top of those issues. And we've got no reason to think that this caused them going forwards. Yeah,
we had cause I knew the second we were in there that the second I tried to drive it from like, you put the robot down in the arena, you put the link in, and then you drive it to your start position. And it was like, I can't even drive it reliably to a start position. Like, it was just instantly, I was like, we've got problems. But by that point, it's too late. Like, you're in the arena, and maybe people would be generous and let us sort of be like, actually, could we take a few minutes to decide this? But I wouldn't want to do that. So it's like, we're in the arena, this is the position we're in, we've got to do our best.
Yeah. We're running. If nothing else will be a fun thing for spinners to hit, let's go with it.
Yeah. So yeah, I knew immediately. And then yeah, our weapon ate all of our electronics in that fight. It was a disappointing fight, I'd say. Yeah.
I mostly was just upset that it was a boring fight for everyone involved.
See, I maintain that in hindsight, I thought we should have tapped out of that. We should have just like... Once we were stuck for that long, and it was clear to me, it was like, our robot's not doing anything. And this is where I tried to drive to the pit and failed. And I thought I should have just tapped out. It was just a waste of everyone's time for us to carry on.
I think the idea of tapping out is very noble, but I think live it would have confused and potentially annoyed people. To tap out with a robot that is still running, I think people would be kind of, what the hell's going on there?
Yeah, but it wasn't running. And like, this is one of those things where like, I don't care what those people think. If they think that that is what that robot should have been performing like and confused as to why we tapped out, don't care. Well, that's harsh. I do care. I'd very happily explain that. If someone said, why did you tap out of that? I'd be like, well, it was clear to me as the driver that the electronics internally of our robot were busted. Like, we weren't going anywhere. We weren't going to win. And it's boring for us to be in that fight and boring for you to watch. So I just tapped out to end it sooner. Which I think is a reasonable thing to do. It didn't occur to me at the time. It was only after the fight that I thought maybe we should have done that just to save time for everyone. But
for what it's worth, I wouldn't have been angry if you did that, but I think I too would have been confused until you explained it. But yeah, for me, I'm mostly just sorry for the audience who had to watch that. I'm also sorry for Simon and Morgan, who, if we had been working properly, could have had a much more enjoyable fight with us. You know, had we been able to drive off of the wedge, for example, it could have been quite an entertaining fight between the three of us.
Well, yeah, had I had control over the robot, I would have driven off the wedge and then gone face first into the spinner as many times as I could. But yeah, we had nothing.
And that brings us on to the highlight of our competitive career. We've kind of spoken through the Bourbon fight. I would have normally been quite excited to face Bourbon. It's a robot we've been watching for a little while. It's a really cool design. It's beautifully made. And it can hit very hard. So any other day, going into that fight, I'd be buzzing for something that I knew was at least going to be entertaining. But with us, like you say, not even being able to drive reliably face first into that big nasty spinner, it didn't feel to me like it was going to be a particularly good fight. It felt to me like it was going to be us spluttering around, hopefully taking some good and exciting hits, but it felt like it was never going to be a contest.
Yeah, we were definitely relying on Bourbon delivering hits for that fight to be worth watching.
And as it was, I sort of expressed that to a few people of, I just don't feel particularly excited for this fight. And a lot of people did say, well, you've got a good chance of winning this if Bourbon gets stuck. And I want to apologise for those people for how honest I probably was about that idea. I basically went, no, I don't want that shit, basically, is what I said, in hopefully nicer words, but I can't guarantee they were.
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't want Bourbon to get stuck. Like, the way that, like I said, we technically won that fight because Bourbon got stuck, and that's one of the worst ways to win, I think. Like, I don't want that. I wanted Bourbon to hit us repeatedly for 3 minutes. Like, that's or 2 minutes, however long the fights were in this tournament. That's what I would have wanted. Like, we're not there to win. We're there to have a laugh, and being thrown around by a robot that we both respect is a laugh.
And also, I think, kind of similar to what I expressed earlier, in many respects, I would rather see Bourbon go through because it is a better machine than ours. Maybe if they took the forks off. But for the most part, for the 99% of its mass, it is a better robot than us.
Yeah.
I'm glad we did at least get to take that one fairly big hit, but one that was enough for a full backflip. And I was really, really pleased to see how the wedge took that. When we looked at it after, there were 2 very small chips out of the leading edge, and that was it. I was really worried that it was going to kind of bend and peel and sort of put quite a lot of stress on the mounting, but it absolutely ate that up, no problem. So in that respect, good little bit of data.
I'll tell you what, like, 4 wood screws into 20mm blocks of HDPE is a pretty good way of holding a wedge on. Or at least seems to be so far. I'm not sure I'd go so far as to recommend that other people do it, but it's worked for us for 2 robots now.
It would have been nice to get the steel wedge drizzled to see how strong it really is against verts. That one very concentrated impact in a specific point is probably the best test you're going to get.
I know that We Loser isn't drizzle, but We Loser got one of those hits and didn't rip it off, so...
Oh yeah, again, minimal damage from that as well, which I'm very pleased to see. But unfortunately, this whole fight is just... things got stuck and it was sad.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've said this already, but I also want to apologise to all of the lovely people who tried to congratulate me on our first win and basically had me going, doesn't count!
This can't be the way we win first. Oh, dear.
I really do mourn the loss of what could have been a great moment of a first win. The only comparable thing I have is from Robo-Nerd, where my front hinge actually flipped someone once and self-righted in a fight. That's like the best I've got so far.
Oh dear. We have complicated feelings about this tournament, for sure.
Which get even more complicated with the next fight. Because after the confusion earlier in particular, it was amazing to get a chance to fight We Loser and Don't Be a Brick.
Yeah.
And as upset as I might be about the way we won that redemption fight, very happy we got to have this fight. If that's the cost of having this fight, I'm okay with that.
It was great fun. I was excited to fight those guys.
So for the utmost clarity, We Loser and Don't Be a Brick was basically a Roboteering supergroup of Alex Mordew and Mark Lee. So as we were fighting this fight, we were up against 2 Bogglebots championships and 3 Robot Wars podiums in one.
That's how you're viewing it.
And I couldn't help view it that way from the moment we found out we were fighting them up until now. That's the only way I can see this fight. I feel like you probably didn't view it quite the same way.
Not quite the same way, no. I was just excited to fight a Bogglebots champion and Alex Mordew.
I mean, that's exactly what I said. They're not people, they're statistics, Sam. Come on.
No, I was just excited to fight them, and they just and We Lose is just a crazy little robot as well. It's just kind of I don't know. I'm just excited.
I do feel a bit bad for Mark in that this cluster was basically We Loser and another robot that people aren't really looking at very often because We Loser was just so insane.
Oh dear, we got some great advice from, I think, Sarah beforehand, being like, just focus on Don't Be a Brick. Don't worry about We Loser. You're not going to hit it anyway.
Yeah.
Just focus on that. And that was great advice.
So what I didn't know at the time was that We Loser had actually put itself out of the arena in its previous fight.
Yeah, and for this one, they took the magnets off the bottom of it as well. I think they had. This is one of the situations where I think they put it in the arena and immediately were like, one side of the drive is locked up. Let's just take the magnets off quickly and go for it. And so it was, I think, possibly more chaotic in this one than the one before.
Yeah, and Don't Be a Brick had also had its magnets removed because I think one of them had shattered in the fight before and locked up a lot of the drive. So they were kind of in safety mode at this point.
Yeah.
Which against us is particularly sensible because the only way we're beating you is if you beat yourself. So removing some of the ways you can do that, very good plan. As it happened, not good enough.
It was quite interesting sort of fighting Don't Be a Brick because, you know, we've got this, compared to that, this huge, full-weight, four-wheel drive wedge point. You look at that thinking, I should be able to push Don't Be a Brick around the arena like it's nothing. And I couldn't because we have no drive power at all and the drive kept cutting out, which was infuriating. I think we were upside down for a lot of this fight as well.
Which I think really helped us.
I think it did, yeah. It was surprisingly easy, actually. So I remember when we were testing this, we did test it upside down briefly, and I was like really concerned about how hard it would be to drive. Like I found it quite hard testing in the kitchen. But in this particular fight, once we were upside down, I somehow managed to just sort of switch in my brain which end of the robot was the front. And I thought, I'm just going to treat the drill as the front of the robot, and then everything was fine. And it drove about as well as it could have done.
And that's particularly funny because beforehand, when you were the right way up, you were driving in reverse anyway to use the drill.
Oh yeah, I wanted to try and get the drill in as much as possible, you know. It's like, got to do that, and there's no point putting the wedge towards Don't Be a Brick. And if anything, We Lose is going to hit from behind anyway, so I may as well have the wedge at that side of it.
We Loser doesn't hit from behind, it hits from above. That's the power move of We Loser.
It certainly does. Hits from everywhere but where you expect.
We did take that one really nice hit to the rear. I'm a big fan of that hit.
Yeah, there was that, and this was it in this fight that we were upside down and We Loser was on top of us for a moment, and that was a terrifying moment where it was sort of like scraping along the bottom of the robot. We got this lovely mark along the bottom, and it wasn't until after the fight that I looked at that, turned the robot over and go, that was right above the battery. Like, there was 3 mil of HDPE between We Loser and the battery in our robot.
And we later learned that We Loser will quite happily go through 3 mil HDPE.
If it had got a good contact, I think it would definitely have knocked the battery, and I presume would have made it go up.
I hope the thickness of foam tape underneath it would have been enough to save us.
Possibly. I don't know. Thankfully, we didn't have to find out. Although maybe the LiPo going up in smoke would have been a better end for this robot than what it got.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Would have been a deserved thing. We'd be like, good.
This fight gave us one of the things I've always wanted, and that is a split decision. I celebrated that harder than I think I've celebrated anything else we've done with a robot. I was genuinely delighted just to hear those words, and unfortunately didn't have split decision in my hand at the time.
No. No. Shame.
You spoke to Tim about the decision, didn't you?
Yeah, right. So I want to clarify something. The decision was announced, and my first reaction was a rather loud, incredulous "what?" And I want to be clear, and I don't want to seem ungrateful, or that like I had a sudden panic afterwards that like people might take that the wrong way, or feel like I was particularly upset with the result. Like I wasn't. I was pleased to get it and stuff, but it was genuinely like I was shocked. I was very surprised that we won that. But no, I did speak to Tim afterwards, and I think basically what it came down to is that. Is that half of the cluster was in the pit, and that the bit that was left, Don't Be a Brick, couldn't fulfil its primary purpose of pushing us around. And so while we were not particularly effective in this fight, we were more effective in most respects, I think, than so all the damage that We Loser did wasn't controlled in any way. And yeah, Don't Be a Brick wasn't pushing us around or winning any of the points from that kind of stuff. So that's why we won. I also see why it was a split. Well, yeah, I see why it was a split decision as well, because it was kind of in some ways, kind of a fight. You know, it's like one robot being a bit chaotic, and then two robots that can't really push each other trying to push each other. So
this feels like it relates back to your Be a Zero speech from last episode, in that because we didn't work, we were able to be a zero, whereas We Loser, by pitting itself, became a sort of negative 0.2 or something like that, and that was just enough to sway it. We didn't win because we did anything right. We won because... Not even because We Loser and Don't Be a Brick did anything wrong.
No, I would characterise this as another instance of us winning because our opponent lost more than anything. And again, I want to be clear. Like I'm really glad that we got the judge's decision. That was really great, and I don't disagree with it either. I would have been happy with it if it went either way. It would have been fine by me. And yeah, the way that Tim explained it all makes sense to me. So like, I don't feel bad for having won it. I don't think that that Mark or Alex feel particularly bad about it either. So it's the way it went, and it was quite cool. That felt like more of a win than the Bourbon one, because it was like at least there was a decision being made there. Like that was a bit more of a definitive kind of active win.
And also, we worked hard to survive to the end of the fight. You had to do some good driving around the pit. Our invertibility actually came into play. You know, the strength of the wedge came into play, and all of that. I feel like we made our own luck in some respects. Not as much as I would like, not as much as I would need to feel really good about it, but the win was at least based on some of our own qualities.
Yeah, like I did everything I could with the robot in that fight, and I didn't. Yeah, I'm happy with given the circumstances and given the problems we were having with the robot. I'm pleased with the way that it performed in that fight.
I'm really impressed with your driving as well. It sounds harsh to say considering the difficulties, but you know what I mean. You adapted to the trouble we were having very well.
Yeah, thank you.
I think it's also worth pointing out that as far as I can tell, the more experienced people in the room largely agreed with the decision. When we were in the fight, Sarah was next to us, and as soon as We Loser went down the pit, she did say something along the lines of, if you can stay alive, you've probably got this. At which point I was just like, aggression! And that was about it. Whatever that means, who knows? Loosely
defined aggression. Sarah was so supportive like before and during that fight. And I really appreciate that. Thank you. It's a random statement, but I stand by it.
Absolutely. So I was trying to agree, but I couldn't add anything. Two more things I want to talk about with this fight. Number one is a question. Was your GoPro still rolling for the decision?
Yes, I probably have my reaction on camera.
Excellent, because I desperately need that in my life. That's our Mangles moment right there. And that, as creepy as this might be, I hope Rory doesn't listen to this, and if anyone who knows him hears, please don't tell him this. That face he pulled was my phone background for like a year.
Oh, dear.
And then the second thing, I regret announcing this too, because I don't know if this will be a good enough conversation to make an edit. But I'd like to try and talk about my reaction to this fight again. This is a conversation we've tried to have, and I've not been able to articulate myself very well. And I'm going to try again. And it could be a complete disaster. because I got surprisingly emotional after this fight. In a good way. And I've been really trying to work out what the hell happened. And I think it's like it's a mix of two things. Underdogs winning, I get genuinely quite emotional about. I semi-cried when I watched Dwayne Nibley beat Daedalus in a really unironic, sincere way that blows my mind in so many respects. So I feel like that's part of it. But I think I was genuinely overwhelmed by the fact that we had not only just had the chance to fight, but also beat the people we had just beaten. And no disrespect to Mark, that is of course more focused on Alex than anyone else. I'm not going to sit here and try to claim that Alex was like an out-and-out childhood hero of mine. Because in Robot Wars terms, that is basically safe for Rex Garrett and no one else. But he is someone that I was watching when I was about 8. And I remember when we were accepted to Bogglebots and I was super excited about it and telling everyone I could, which wasn't a huge number of people, but everyone I could. I remember sort of trying to explain my excitement to my dad. And it was Alex that I brought up to do that. It was that exact fact that I brought up to do that. And without wishing to get too deep, when I was young, Robot Wars was an obsession that got me through a lot of shit. And the fact that I now get to do it is something that I don't think I've always appreciated as much as I should. And that moment really crystallised all of that for me, I think.
Yeah. That's super cool, man.
And it's just a shame that we couldn't have won that fight better. Because then it would be an even... then it would be a purely brilliant thing to look back on. But as upset as I can be about how the robot performed and the entertainment value of our fights, no one's taken that one away from me. Even me. Even I can't. And you, if nothing else, got to watch me try to hold a screwdriver afterwards.
Yeah, there's definitely something special about sort of interacting with people that you know from like TV in that way. I know that like Alex is not some famous TV star or anything like that, but yeah, like it was really cool to fight one of his robots in a tournament, like for sure, really cool.
I think there are differing levels of fame and influence that a person can have. And being someone who was on Robot Wars, in the grand universal scheme of things, isn't very much. But to me, it's bloody big. So I don't think it's about who a person is generally, it's just who they are in your sphere.
Yeah.
And yeah, Alex and all the sort of other people around, really, in that respect, are very big in my sphere.
Yeah.
And now, we should move on. Not to our next fight, but I'm just going to flag right now. There's going to be a link in the show notes to Maximum Overdrive versus End Boss, and everyone should damn well watch it. And I'm not going to say why, they just should.
Okay. Link in the show notes.
So now we get to have our third career match against Let the Good Times Roll. And it ended exactly how it should have.
Shockingly, we lost again.
When your luck runs out, it runs out.
This was another interesting fight where, again, like, it took a long time for Let the Good Times Roll to get a good bite and actually send us flying anywhere. Like, there was a lot of time with it just grinding against the wedge.
There was an absolutely perfect interaction between the angle of our wedge and the combo of their fork and drum sort of angles.
Yeah.
Where they seemed to make contact maybe 1 millimetre above the actual lip of the wedge. And there were moments where the drive seemed to engage properly and we actually pushed them a little bit.
Just for a moment.
So we know that we can push, a two-wheel drive robot with not very grippy foam wheels. Yay!
Oh dear, what a disappointment. But yeah, there's a wonderful pattern along the bottom edge of our wedge where Let the Good Times Roll was just grinding away slowly without ever getting a good bite. Until I showed my rear end and then we got thrown out of the arena.
Totally worth it to get the drill destroyed.
Oh, yeah. Well, there was a certain point. My memory of it is very different to what actually happened in the fight. My memory was like, screw it, I'm going to go in full power with the drill. What actually I think happened is that I turned around and then the drill got snapped before I actually managed to drive anywhere. But yeah, that was very different in my head.
I don't think the videos do that moment justice. I remember there being a really good crack as that thing went, because it did properly shear the drill bit.
Obviously, I knew it would snap. Like, it was not going to survive that, but...
No, we went in assuming that actually their drum would snap.
Yeah. They'd find themselves with holes in the drum.
It is a big old drum as well. Big, heavy drum.
Yeah.
And while there are more sort of, I suppose, recognised names in the class, like Swag Demon, X301, it is easy to overlook Let the Good Times Roll, but both times we've fought it and it's working, it hits really hard.
Yeah.
It's well driven. It survives really well. Everything about it is a really good machine, and it completely deserved to take the title.
Yeah.
The Snappy fight and the Lancer Frog fights in particular really stand out.
We lost to the winner, didn't we? I would say that's a pretty good result.
I mean, we've had Euros aside, so I suppose only just over half the times we've competed, we have gone out to either the winner or second place.
There you go, people. If you beat us, you're on track for the winner.
I just realised it's not technically gone out either. It was just lost to in Bogglebox because it was the first round. But you know what I mean? Everyone should be hoping to draw us,
Yeah, well, they should, It's a privilege and an honour to fight such high-class robots.
Internationally renowned wedge. There won't be another four-wheel drive wedge, that's for sure.
No, I think we'll take another stab at four-wheel drive for sure, but well, maybe not. No, we will do another four-wheel drive robot. It won't be a pure wedge though. I think what we definitely learned is that if you're going to build a wedge bot, you've got to nail it. Like you can't have a wedge bot that doesn't work properly. It's just not good. You've got to get it right.
Yeah, and while the weapon was a fun thing to test and to watch once, it was not something that was entertaining in a fight. It's good for a giggle, and I'm glad it got some laughs, because that's exactly what we wanted. But I certainly felt, driving in the Gladiator, even though we'd removed the weapon by then, I certainly felt like I would never have used it. Whereas if I'd had a hammer in the Gladiator, I could have had a lot of fun, because I could be active.
Yeah.
Whereas a weapon that you just turn on and drive into things with, obviously if it's a big spinner, fantastic. Otherwise, kind of dull to watch and use.
I can think of ways to make this idea more entertaining. Like, we knew when we were doing this that this was very much a technically an active weapon. It's loosely attached to one of those 1,000 RPM gear motor things. Like, there's no power behind it. There's no real sort of weight behind anything that's going on. It's just kind of there for amusement. And when we were sort of working out whether or not we wanted to do it, it was, for me at least, it was right on the edge with the amount of motion that it had. And I remember having this conversation with you, Ryan, before we were doing it, sort of like, this is enough for a live event, but if we were doing this for something that was like filmed like Bugglebots, this doesn't read on camera enough to be funny. I think having sort of been there even at a live event, I think even there it's not enough. So I think if it had a longer stroke, if we had a bigger drill bit, or if we had something that had a lot more momentum, if it made the whole robot shake when it was going at full tilt and stuff like that. Like, I can think of ways to make it funnier. I don't think there's any way to make this an effective weapon, but like, I can think of lots of ways to make it funnier. But I think in order to do that, we would have had to have sacrificed our drive. Not that would have been much a sacrifice, but it would have deprived us of some learning opportunities if we'd just done two-wheel drive. So, everything about this robot is a product of it being a test platform for four-wheel drive and different materials, and a product of it being a very rushed build. Like, I think if we did it again, I probably wouldn't do it with just a motor and a crankshaft. I'd probably do it with something else. It was what it was. It got laughs, and that's enough for me. We made a few people laugh with it. I made me laugh using it against Bourbon. Cracked me up then. And so I'm happy that we did it. It was enough. I'm glad that we took it out when we did, because it was like, this has served its purpose now. We need to take it out so that we can rearrange the internals to try and solve what's going on with our electronics issues. And yeah, like, it was fine. But yeah, I wouldn't do this small of a weapon again. I think it's either got to, it's like, for ineffective weapons, it's got to be funny. It's got to make people laugh, or at the very least be entertaining in some way. And a big wavy axe is much more effective than this.
Part of me wishes we had it on in the Gladiator just so we could whack it up to full speed and leave it there. That might have at least been funny.
I'm not sure you'd see it. That's the thing. That's sort of the problem. I think it really only works if you're watching one robot and watching it closely.
For what it's worth, I enjoyed the Gladiator. I'm glad I took an opportunity to drive.
Yeah, I was glad you took an opportunity to drive as well. I've been trying to get you to drive the Beetle Waits for ages.
I mean, I drove around a bit at Robo Nerds, but it's always a question of, you are a better driver than me, especially now you've had all the events you've had driving, and while I can happily go into a fun fight like the Gladiator and have a nice time, I've always felt every fight we've gone into we've had a chance of winning. And again, while I'm not there to win, I think the way winning is another way for the robot to be entertaining. If Hello There goes into the Gladiator at Euros and wins it, I think a lot of people are quite happy, including us.
Yeah.
And I know you won't necessarily agree with this, but I think that there is value to people seeing the silly pink robot with big googly eyes win something.
Oh yeah, I mean everything about all the two Beetle Weights we've built now is walking that line of we want to build a robot that's predominantly entertaining, but it's important for us that it's also capable of winning. Like, it needs to be plausible that this has won a fight, and plausible that it's won it definitively as well. Like, I'd like to have a robot that's not so we could build robots that are funny and entertaining, but the only way they can win is if the other robot knocks itself out in some way, which is fine, but that's not what we want to build. So it's important for both of us that what we build has the potential to knock the opponent out in some way.
Even if that is just by pitting, just having some pushing power, that's fine by me.
Yeah.
And for me, the difference with this fight is that we almost certainly weren't going to win because the robot fundamentally didn't work. And if we had won, I would have been wanting to give the trophy to second place because that robot should not be winning. I'm sure you would have stopped me doing that, but
with the gladiators and stuff, I think that we do stand a good chance of winning those things, because assuming we don't end up in the pit or like pinned in some way, which is what's happened in the past, assuming none of that happens, because we've got like a massively oversized battery for the kinds of stuff that we do in these robots, I think that there's a very real chance that we would win the endurance game there and not run out of battery. I'm not sure what it would take to kill our battery in a day, but like, I think we'd have to try pretty hard to do that. I do wonder if we should do a smaller battery in the future, but yeah, for these gladiators and stuff, like I don't think we're going to lose by running out of battery. And as long as we can keep it driving, I think we could win. We have the power.
And I do feel the way we went out in the Gladiator was pure bad luck. Really good manoeuvre from, I don't know if they call it Igor or Igor. I want to call it Igor. Really good manoeuvre to flip us. And then we just got hung up on one thing and then carefully transferred onto another thing and just somehow stayed stuck. I think because we were clearly no threat, a lot of people were going to leave us alone. As is, we still finished, I think, 7th, which is amazing. What I was really pleased with was the fact that I had a chance to drive at some spinners.
Yeah, I think you drove really well in that fight, by the way. Like, I know you keep sort of saying that I'm a better driver than you, and I don't think we know that because you haven't driven enough. But I think you drove really well.
I think I was able to drive quite well in that situation because there were targets everywhere. So wherever I went, it was going to look intentional. I can tell you, most of what happened was not intentional. There's one moment where I produce a beautiful little last-second turn to get away from Night Fury. I was trying to drive straight at it. My aim in that fight became, get Night Fury to fly. If I could get a quick enough drive at them wedge first, I thought they might, get deflected, and that would have been fun for me. As it was, we took loads of hits on the wedge, tanked them beautifully, took some to the HDPE sides, they didn't do too much damage. Really good to know that the armour we have on there seems to be sort of sufficient for at least those glancing blows. I was going somewhere with this and I've forgotten where. I'll just keep using this inflection until I remember. So yeah, my aim was to do that. It didn't quite work out. I still got useful stuff out of it. That's fine by me. But as there were fewer and fewer robots, the issues I was having were going to become more and more clear. And when you look at it, I never really left that side of the arena.
You had one moment when you were a bit too close to the pit for comfort, but you got away from that, and that was fine.
I think I got away because of an unplanned left turn. But what's truly amazing about the whole thing is that for the whole fight, it was turning left. But when we took it apart, it was the back right drive that was broken. So that must have been completely separate and happened afterwards, while I was upside down and pinned trying to get away.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
And that, for the record, is the worst damage we've ever taken. A motor literally just detached itself from its gearbox in the course of that fight.
This is the tournament where we learned that it's worth taking apart the motor and then thread locking it back together again.
Yes. I do think, by the way, there is a difference in quality between the motors we had in Hello There and the motors we had in Kylo. Hello There were the plastic backs, Kylo were the metal backs, which I assume there wasn't a big difference between, but everyone seems to agree there is a big difference between them. No one can agree what that difference is, but they definitely agree there is one.
My understanding is that the plastic back ones have higher torque, so they would have been better to use in this robot. But we don't have enough plastic back robots in stock, and when I ordered them, I didn't realise there was that much of a difference, so we just bought whichever ones would get to us quickest.
I'm fairly sure the image from the listing you brought was plastic backed.
I'm not sure.
Either way, it's what we got. And to be honest, for us, motors are motors. But apparently, one of the key differences could be that these are more noisy, which could potentially have been our issue.
Yeah, so should we talk about the issues we've had then?
You can talk about the issues because you have done far more of the work trying to debug it. I will chip in when I feel I can. Oh, hang on. Back to the Gladiator for a second.
Yeah?
Best hit we took all tournament, apart from Igor getting between our base plate and back panel, which was genuinely terrifying. Wee Loser. Early in the fight, jumps up the ramp, lands weapon first on our top plate and springs backwards. Awesome hit. Went straight through the top plate, could have done a lot of damage. Right, what went wrong?
Oh, I have one other thing. An accidental sort of like stroke of genius on our part.
Yes!
With the back armour. So the back of Kylo Ren, by accident, more than anything, is not one sheet of 10mm HDPE. It is 2 sheets of 5mm HDPE sandwiched together. The reasons for that are long, tedious and boring, and I'm not going to explain them, but that's the way that it is. And I forget who did it. I don't know where the damage came from, but
it was
like
Wee Loser in the Wee Loser and Don't Be a Brick fight when they hit us at the back and flipped us 1.5 times.
So yeah, so it hit us at the back and cracked the outer layer of HDPE and put a big sort of like mark in it. But the inner layer, absolutely fine. I think it would have been worse for us had we used thicker HDPE there, because it wouldn't have had that kind of failure point on the outer layer to sort of absorb all of that. So I just thought that was interesting.
It was nice because replacing the back panel would have been a lot of work because a lot of things fastened to it.
Yeah.
And because we had that more ablative layer on top of it on the outside, when that got broken, we could happily just trim it down to the top fit again and carry on without worrying about it. So yeah, it was, as you say, an unintentional stroke of absolute genius that we genuinely may try and recreate in future.
It's not a cost-effective way of doing 10mm armour around your robot, because I think buying lots of sheets of 5 is more expensive than the equivalent area of 10, but it was, I don't know, it was just sort of a nice sort of surprise to see the way that worked.
I mean, trying to build in the most cost-effective way probably isn't the most cost-effective thing to do at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's interesting to sort of like figure out where's it worth spending money. Right, we should get to electronics and then we can talk about throwing money at problems.
Yes.
So I've explained this in a video. We'll probably put a link to this video in the show notes. And if you've been on the Facebook page and stuff, you will have seen this video. So this is going to be quite boring if you've heard this before. But Kylo had electronics issues for the whole day. The best I can describe it is as if the transmitter was being turned off for 5 seconds at a time. I had no control. The robot just died. It's not as if it never did anything that felt like it was getting phantom input. It just stopped It just stopped, basically. I think all the situations where it veered off to one side suddenly, I think that's just the weight distribution of the robot and stuff like that. I don't think that's anything to do with the electronics. I think that's just the mechanics of the robot and dodgy weight distribution. But every now and again, the robot would just die. It only ever happened in the arena. And I do mean in the arena. Like, I could never reproduce this at our workbench in the same venue. Just in the arena, this would go wrong. And the conclusion that I'm coming to is that there's lots of things that contributed to this being a problem. I think that there is an interaction between the radio signals and the arena. Like, the arena forms something of a Faraday cage, and obviously the steel floor is going to dampen a bunch of signals as well. So I think that contributes to it. We have been told about putting capacitors across the terminals of the motor. I didn't know about that. I've done some research. That's really interesting. So I think what happens is that the arcing from the brushes causes a bunch of RF noise to go back through the wires and stuff like that, which is fascinating to me. So we will do that next time. We will put capacitors across the motors to try and reduce that. What my current plan is, I think, is it 100 NUFs? I can't remember now.
100 NUF. That's the advice we were given.
I think it's 100 NUFs, 100 nanofarads. But anyway, we've given some advice. If you have different advice, please tell me. I'm curious to know. I also did some reading on my own, and that agreed with the advice I was given. So I'm happy with those capacitors. We'll try them and see what happens. The other thing that was suggested is our receiver has 2 antennae, and the best practice is apparently to make sure they're at 90 degrees to each other, which, when I read that, rang a bell in my head. Part of my degree was like radio, like comms engineering and like radio stuff. So I have had some experience with this, and it rang a bell when I read that. So I'll make sure that they are at 90 degrees in future robots. I think they were at best randomly placed in the robot. I've never given it any thought before. I don't know if the length of the antenna makes a difference. One thing I've thought that we should maybe try would be to have longer wires and have one running along the back of the robot and then one running along the side of the robot, so that they're longer antenna that are at 90 degrees. I don't know how much difference that would make. I don't know if that's worth doing or not.
My understanding is that antenna length is tuned in relation to wavelength in some way. So I'm not sure that just throwing a random length antenna on is a good thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd love to know if someone has advice on that. I'd be curious to know what it is. What else have we been? I was given advice about the transmitter settings as well. There's like IDs and ways that you can sort of make sure that it binds to one thing a bit more specifically. The thought was, if there's lots of people that are using the same transmitter with the same firmware, running the sort of default unchanged values for these things, that there'd be lots of interference. So I have made the appropriate changes on our transmitter so that it more uniquely binds to the thing. It has definitely made a difference, because so before I made that change, because I have 3 models programmed into our transmitter now. I have Split Decision, Hello There, and Kylo When, and all 3 of those models could all be engaged on the transmitter, or the receiver, sorry, if that makes sense. So like, if I had my transmitter paired to the receiver, it didn't matter which of those models I selected, it would still sort of transmit stuff, and stuff would happen. Not necessarily the right stuff, but stuff would happen. But now that I've changed that number, the 1 for Kylo will only send signals to the receiver if I've actually got Kylo selected. So if I select Hello There, it will no longer control Kylo. So it has made a difference. I hope that will help. And then the more extreme end of the advice has basically been buy a new transmitter and new receivers, which I will definitely bear in mind. I think the transmitter was something like 70 quid. I don't really want to buy a new one.
It's one of the cheaper ones out there as well.
Yeah, like I'm normally a kind of a throw money at problems kind of a guy, but like, if someone can sort of show me hard proof that this will absolutely fix the problem and I'll never have it again, I will absolutely buy a new transmitter. But for now, it's on the end of my list of things to try. If we consistently have these problems, I will buy a new transmitter, but I'd rather not. I might try new receivers because they are cheaper to try.
The tricky thing with all of these problems is that almost all of them are things that we did on Hello There and didn't have a problem with. So it's the same, we actually used the receiver out of Hello There in Kylo for the last couple of fights.
Well, so we've never had these problems to this extreme. I've definitely had some issues with robots in gladiator or gladiator-like things. Like I said, this is why I think that this is a combination. This is like all of these factors all coming together. I think it's a combination of there are lots of radios in the area, the fact that the arena is the way that it is, the way that our antenna were, the amount of noise generated from the electronics in the robot, the fact that we had 4 motors rather than 2. I think all of these things grouped together, and it's the combination of all of them that caused the complete failure that we had. Hello There obviously had fewer motors. It had the plastic back ones, which may make less noise or may make more noise. I'm not sure which way around it is, but it had different motors, fewer of them. The receiver was further away from the motors, and the antenna were probably at 90 degrees by accident more than anything. So there were definitely differences, but I have had, problems at RoboNerd with both Hello There and Split Decision. A far less problem, but like far smaller scale. But every now and then, it would be as if there was like a half-second delay between what I did and the robot moving, which I think is probably the interference thing. So hopefully that'll go away. So we've had these problems possibly to a much lesser extent. Never enough for me to think it was a serious issue. Just I always put it down to, it's just one of those things that happens when you've got lots of robots together, which is a lack of experience, obviously. So I think this is just just a nightmare of all these things coming together at once and causing us complete failure.
For me, I think the thing that makes most sense as a single big thing would be the noise. And I think you're quite quick to dismiss that veering off thing as a weight balance thing when I'm not sure that's reasonable. Our experience of driving a robot that is purely front wheels is very similar to that, so I can understand why you would assume majority of weight over the front equals that. But for me, in the Gladiator at least, those swerves were always accompanied by a cutout. So I feel like there's some kind of link there. But as you say, it could be a variety of things. And what makes it so incredibly frustrating is that we've got to go into whatever we build next, knowing this is a problem, and knowing that if it is a problem, it won't show itself until we get in an arena. Because you've done everything you can to recreate this at home, and it's just not happening.
This is the thing that's killing me, is that I can't reproduce it. I can't show that this has changed it. I'm hoping that once the capacitors arrive, they should arrive tomorrow maybe, I will put them on and I will reassemble Kylo and test drive it again and see if this, because the swerviness I can reproduce in the kitchen, like it does happen when I'm driving it at home. So if I put the capacitors on and it goes away, then we will have learned something. But yeah, beyond that, I can't reproduce it at home, and I have tried. I wondered if it was temperature, and so I cooled Kylo when down and couldn't reproduce it. I wondered if it was to do with current draw from the motors causing the voltage rail to drop to a point where things started resetting. Which I think that's what a brownout is. I'm not sure. So in order to replicate that, I have basically, held my foot against it and held the motors at stall for a few seconds just to sort of see if it cuts out at that point, and it doesn't. I've made sure when testing at home to go from 0 to 100 instantly to sort of really maximize the load on the robot as best I can. I've even tried on the tiny little bit of steel that we have. I've even tried driving it across that. I've tried having the motors on full throttle and holding the steel near it to see if it's to do with movement over steel. I've waved the steel over it. I've put the transmitter on the other side of the steel. I've had the robot in the kitchen while I'm in the office, which means the signal's going through 2 walls to get there, and I can't reproduce it. I've tried everything I can think of to try and reproduce these issues at home, and I think, short of having an arena and a bunch of other people with radios on, I don't know how to reproduce it. So we'll try all these things for next time, and I really appreciate all the help that we've been given, all the advice. I will try all of it in price order.
You know what this means? It means the best fight that Kylo Ren ever had is also the only one that wasn't filmed. And that is the fight we had in the kitchen the night before between Kylo and Hello There.
Yeah.
Where it performed really well, which is so upsetting.
Yeah, it does work. It's by far from the best robot in the world, but it does work. The show that it put on at Ferbuary is nothing compared to what it's capable of. which is frustrating. I'm sort of, yeah, I'm disappointed in so many ways in the way that it performed, but we've also learned a lot from it. And that's what I keep trying to sort of remind myself, like, this has taught us so much. We've learned so much more from this robot than we did from Hello There. And so I'm really glad that we built it. And I'm glad that we built it in the amount of time we did. And yeah, I'm overall, I would say I'm happy, although I have to convince myself of that, which is a bit of a shame.
I think I'm satisfied rather than happy. I can rationalise this into a worthwhile experience. And again, that's the experience of competing with Kylo Ren, not going to the event. Going to the event, absolute win. It's just our fights that are the letdown. And I must say, I now have a lot more ability to empathise with people who have a tough time at a tournament or a tough time with a specific robot. I think I've always had the ability to sympathise, but now I actually know how it feels.
Yeah.
And I guess in a way, I'm glad I've had that experience now. Whilst having it is not enjoyable, I feel a lot more informed about what I'm doing for it.
Yeah, it's been really interesting building these robots and taking part in these events. Because so when we started Spinnerproof, we'd never built a robot. And it was proper, like, armchair engineering stuff. And it's really interesting thinking about some of the stuff that I know I've said about people who have had problems with robots. And I want to go back in time and slap myself for it because this is so much harder than I thought it was. So that's been a really interesting sort of journey, and I'm glad that we've done it in public as well. I'm really glad that you can, if you want, like, you know, that we've got this public record of our experience and our journey with this, and our personal growth and understanding of all the things that can go wrong.
If nothing else, I hope that visually, Kylo Ren represented a kind of progression in what we're doing that is going to be really visible to people. This idea of, you know, the first thing we built, whilst visually striking, it had some very visible issues. You know, just the quality of cuts, for example, and the big gap between the rear armour and the base plate and things like that. If someone looks closely, it's not a very well-made robot. It's one that a lot of time went into, and it still didn't come out particularly polished. Whereas this one had a lot less time and came out looking a lot more polished. There are still some panel gaps, some quite alarming panel gaps in places, but I think overall it does show that we've learned a lot. And again, I don't want to bang on about this, but I think we are helping to show that you can do this stuff with basic tools. We made the top 16, you know, we're serious robot now. Well, if you really want an example of that, just look at Snappy. Snappy is where, if Kylo had a photo on its bedroom wall, a poster of what it wanted to be, it would be Snappy.
Yeah.
Snappy with a reciprocating drill, obviously, but...
Yeah, clearly. Yeah, Snappy was so good this year.
Yeah, I find myself more and more having conversations online with people where I'm basically going, this is not as inaccessible as you think, look what we did. And being able to say that we made the top 16 without giving any of the context of how we got there helps that argument.
Oh dear, yeah. I have one more request for advice, if I may.
Mm-hmm. I'll do my best to give you it.
Well, it's less to you, more to the wider audience. So we have used, I think quite intentionally, quite cheap components in a lot of places. We're using cheap 25mm gear motor things. They're like £6 a pop and on eBay. And we're using cheap-ish sort of dual speed controller thing. So it's one speed controller that's got the two channels. It has onboard mixing and stuff. I think the Bristol Bot Builder guys sell a version of this for ant weights. You can buy higher amperage versions, which is what we have in, which we used at Marlow in Hello There, and we used 2 of them in Kylo Wen. Like, the reason we've done that is cheapness. is we don't have a huge amount of money to put into this stuff, and we've always had this sort of idea of, like, we'd rather use cheap components that we don't mind being broken. We don't ever want to be in a position where we're turning down a fight for fear of breaking something in our robot. We want all the stuff to be not quite disposable, but also not irreplaceable, if that makes sense. Like, if we invested in brushless drive, for example, it'd be like we could buy one set of that, and then buying spares would be a bit painful. However, there's obviously a middle ground between £6 motors and expensive brushless systems. So I'm wondering, like, is it worth investing more in the in nicer motors? Like, because like we've had gearboxes fail in these motors, or we've had them fall apart, and it's like, if we took the time to harden these with thread lock, would that be enough? Or should we be looking at those 22mm motors with the planetary gearboxes? I know, what is it? It's Wrangle Box, is that where I'm thinking of? Where they sell sort of like pre-hardened versions of these motors as well?
Yeah, they're kind of sourced with provenance as well, I believe, rather than being the eBay lottery that we play.
Yeah, so there's all that kind of stuff, and like, what I'm concerned about is that our current policy of cheap components that we're happy to replace, I'm wondering if that's going to end up being more expensive in the long run. So aside from the obvious, more expensive things are probably going to be better. Like, for the purposes of a robot that we're not expecting to ever like consistently win tournaments, we're not aiming to make the world's most competitive robot, and I'm not willing to spend the amount of money required to do that. But like, would it be worth? Should we be considering better speed controllers? Should we be using those, like, is it the BB10s? Like, they're like 20 quid or something. Like, should we be using those? Are they better enough to be worth it for what we're doing? I don't know. And the same for the motors and stuff. I think those are the sort of main things I'm not sure about. And I'm having so many questions. I have a really esoteric question. I've noticed that the BB10 and also the speed controllers that Cosmin was selling, the brushed ones, they're described as speed controllers that used to be brushless controllers that have had firmware changes to make them brushed controllers. And I'm curious about why that is. Like, why convert a brushless controller to for brushed motors rather than building a controller for brushed motors? Like, what's the difference there? What's the advantage of that approach? Those are my questions.
Move back next time with more of Sam's Roboteering questions.
Well, the problem is, as we get deeper into this, I'm beginning to understand more of the questions that I can be asking. Because when we started, it was like, here's a big field of things that we don't know, and I don't know what I don't know, and I don't know how to formulate questions to find out more. But now that we're learning more, I'm getting more specific questions. So those are my two at the moment. Should we be spending more on speed controllers and motors for the kinds of robots that we're trying to build? And why are speed controllers the way they are?
We've gone from give us something that works to give us something that might work better. That's the point we're at now.
Indeed.
For what's worth, I have quite strong opinions on some of the early questions, but that's not a podcast-worthy conversation yet.
Okay.
Expensive for two-wheel drive, cheap for four. There we go, I said it. Sorry, two-motor drive.
Well, so the thing is, like, the BB10s can do two motors each, can't they? So, like, should we be doing that?
I was thinking more for motors there, but because the difference between what we're using now and those 22mm planetaries is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's nearly 3 times as expensive for those things.
Snappy made them look good.
Yeah.
And the other robots that were running them.
Yeah, anyway, those are my questions. Have you got any more to say?
I just want to quote one particularly experienced competitor who we spoke to on the day and afterwards. Robots are arseholes. They just are.
That they are.
Even when you think you're doing something simple that can't go wrong, they will find a way.
They certainly do.
That's it from me, though.
Cool. Thanks again to everyone for being lovely and supportive of us. It means a lot. It's really lovely speaking to everyone and people encouraging us with our robot.
People see the good in what we've done, even when we can't. Outro me.
Outro you? Right, I should probably think about it a bit more this time. Last time was a bit of a mess, but it deserved to be. But this is episode 70. This is serious now.
I want to know everyone's favourite sauce.
Okay. You could do the outro and ask.
I can't do the outro, though.
Yeah, but you could, though.
The universe would implode.
Maybe if you did the outro, we'd be able to build a good robot.
Yeah, we're completely fucked then, aren't we?
You can find the show notes for this episode at spinnerproof.com/episodes/70. And there you can find links to all the stuff we've talked about today. You can also find a link to our Twitter @Spinnerproof, where you can tweet to us your favourite source.